So we're back, and we are here with Shakirah in Give Me My Flowers.
Yes.
And it is, my God, beautiful.
Yeah.
Tell us, my dear, tell us about this.
Okay, so welcome to the Give Me My Flowers exhibition. This body of work was literally a labor of love, play, exploration, and really just like seeking and understanding. It started out with one of our really good friends, Akeem, who's also a fellow creative, and us really just being locked up inside from quarantine and having this desire to just go outside and play. And we had both been wanting to work with one another on some creative level, so I said, okay, let's just go out. I am always one to work with fabrics, household items, bringing them outside, recreating, a very kind of like living room setup outside. And so you'll see a lot of that type of materiality within my work frequently. So we literally started with that.
Okay.
I had also wanted to play around with crumpled paper and, add that level of texture as a backdrop. So I literally just started with those materials. And it's the first one to start the series.
Okay.
We literally went out within the Brandywine area. And initially when we were like driving around scoping out the area to shoot, I'm like, I'm not feeling the vibe. Let's go to this basketball court that's low-key like a tennis court. I just feel like this dynamic of showing masculine men on a basketball court, but having these household items might do something. So let's just go there. Wow. And we did. And I set up the backdrop in a traditional way where it was just simply just hung from the backdrop brackets. Again, the crumpled paper just gave it that extra layer of texture. Yeah. But having him pose with these household items that were significant to him, holding a fabric, giving movement with the basketball court in the center or like in the backdrop was what kind of started the narrative. Okay. And it wasn't until I finished editing the series from this particular set and
specifically
I'm
just
posting
Akeem.
Just Akeem.
Yeah.
None of this other work was created.
Oh, wow.
It was just him.
Okay.
And it started with that set that I'm posting it on Instagram, typing out the caption, and within me typing out the caption and observing the image, I'm like recognizing this very mass-presenting man who's very in tune with his feminine energy, very soft touch. A lot of times I'll pose women and men to be very soft and like, just kind of like soft movements. And so that's what he did on his own without me even telling him. So that's just his energy. That's just what he embodies. And so recognizing that through the caption, I'm typing out masculine men, embracing his feminine energy without shame. And so give him his flowers. I do a lot of floral play, so I posed him with flowers as well. So you'll see that represented throughout the work. And it literally was birthed from there without me even knowing it. When, as I know you guys are like looking around digesting, so yes, digest.
Because I didn't see it from that perspective.
Yeah. But that's exactly the breakdown. It started with just curiosity, exploration, and just us playing. Then, after thinking about it more, and I'm like, okay, well, this is getting really good reception from people. People seem to be really liking this. The concept was literally birthed from me typing out the caption on Instagram. So I had to continue the story.
Right.
So for me, it was like, okay, how do I show various representations of men? Right. And also men, like other male relationship dynamics. So obviously Seven and I do a ton of work together, creative work. Again, he's my best friend, so I value all the things that he does within his work. And I was like, okay, let's do you and your son. Let's show a father-son dynamic. And so we went to the park. Again, each person's set is styled to their liking. Each person's environment is different and aids to their, whatever they're exuding.
But you're still adding in your...
Still adding in the flair.
Yeah.
Because everybody still had a curated backdrop. Everybody still had florals implemented. Everyone still had fabrics. And we were outside. So, and the outside speaks to the juxtaposition of this outside, exterior, rough, tough, persona that men often have to embody because they don't have a choice. They're not allowed to feel, to be vulnerable, to be themselves a lot of times. So they have to portray this image on the outside when on the inside it's completely different. Right. So that's why everybody's set was outside. So that was completely consistent throughout each person's set. But what was significant about Seven's was I intentionally kept his simplistic because I wanted him and his son to be photographed in the classic Islamic thobe. So obviously Seven does a lot of painted garments, and again, it's like flooded with his frequency language, and both of them wore thobe that was painted on, and I wanted that to just be that to be centered really.
So
And then of course like juxtaposing it with the florals.
So the funny thing about her asking me to do that with my son, what she didn't know is like that's one of my biggest things I got over for is being traumatic of having kids early. I had my first child at 16.
Okay.
I had my son in college. And the dichotomy of having those on is at his age, I was teased for wearing a dress.
Okay.
At my age, I'm embraced wearing a thobe. Now other men want to say, hey, you're like a king. Can I get a thobe? So it's so much within that photo that even as my best friend, she has broken up so many different curses, so many different traumatic things that I dealt with. Like even having a photo with my son, I don't have pictures with my dad.
Right.
I have none, no memories, no basketball games, no nothing. So that was very, very significant for myself.
Yeah, and I mean, what greater way to honor somebody than by giving them flowers?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's honestly like the greatest and utmost way of honoring someone. The problem is we do it when they're gone.
Yeah.
So for me, it was simply, and it goes back to him with By My Heart Before I Die, it's honor me now. Honor me while my greatness is here before I leave this plane of existence. So that was Seven and JoJo. And for me, again, like I said, I wanted to showcase various representations of man. Also, men who were not in the traditional sense either with masculinity, but ones who may have had a queer experience or who are queer in this moment. So there's a variety of different men here. But the next one to do this was Jaquan. And if you know Jaquan, you know his spirit. But Jaquan's set we did in front of his grandfather's business, Leroy's. So his last name is Jaquan Leroy.
Yeah.
Right? He's a visual artist here. And every person that I photographed, I have a personal relationship with.
Okay.
So I knew how to curate their set based off of them. So it only made sense to do Jaquan's in front of Leroy's because it's like a hood staple. If you know, you know. Like, if you're from Wilmington, you know that space. And it was a special way for him to honor his legacy, like his grandfather's legacy.
Wow.
And recently, his grandfather did pass away. But for him to have been able to create this work prior to, again, was a way of honoring. So Jaquan was super fun. He was. It was really, really hot. And
Let me just say, it wasn't a real emotional tear.
Oh no!
It was a curated tear. But it was so perfect because you know when the wind strikes your eye and that rain
hysterical.
and that
You were
tear.
supposed to give us a story as he was thinking about his grandfather,
No.
and the spirit hit him, and the tear. No, that
It
was
was
hot.
wind. It was wind and it was hot. Right there. It was real. It was real.
it was a real tear. It was absolutely a real tear. But I'm telling you, when that wind strikes the right part of your eye and you can't blink, and I'm telling you, don't blink, it was that.
All I see is memes right now. Now that you told me that story, that's great.
So his tear was very real, and it was perfect because it was like the right emotion that I was looking for.
Wow.
So thank you to the wind and spirit winds that gave us that tear. But that was Jaquan. His story was for his grandfather. And then I said, okay, well, I need a hyper feminine male. I need a queer presence. I need somebody who is not afraid, you know what I mean, to speak, to be themselves, to be brave, and to do it without shame. And I had been following this individual, Aaron, who is such a sweet person to me. I love him. He is so talented, and I felt that he would be the perfect addition. When we actually were thinking about where to shoot his location, I was like, just send me your location address, and I'll just kind of like scope it around, because that's usually what I'll do. So he lives in Philly, so we went to Philly for that. I met him at his home, and I just looked on Google Maps, and I saw that there was a church across the street. And it wasn't until I actually got there that I'm looking at it, and I'm like, wow, this is an incredible sign that says Jesus Saves. What better way, like the irony, to photograph this hyper gay man in front of this church sign that says Jesus Saves, because oftentimes within religion and Christianity, to be gay is frowned upon. You can't be yourself because it's a sin.
Right.
So I thought that was the perfect juxtaposition to photograph him in a dress,
Right.
wearing this cowboy hat, holding these florals, and just being super unapologetic. We put rhinestones in his hair and just really had fun playing. I had a super fun sequins backdrop, tossed it across to give it that pop of color against his green dress, and it was written from there. That was his story. And I was in London posting his content, and that's how I'm, again, looking at each of these images and telling the story as I go.
Wow.
None of this was curated. I didn't know this was going to happen. I'm literally developing
watching
the story as it goes.
I remember watching you do that, and I was like, oh, I like this.
Yeah, and so at the time prior to Aaron, actually, right after Jaquan, because it's a little bit out of order, right after Jaquan, I got a tattoo. And I got a tattoo of the Venus of Willendorf by Oba, who is a super talented tattoo artist.
We interviewed him.
If you don't know, you should know. Push Tattoos, shout out to you, Oba. And I wanted to show a relationship dynamic again, so husband and husband. And him and Brandon are extremely talented individuals here again in the community. His husband is a hairstylist. Oba owns this beautiful tattoo shop, so it was like, of course, I'm gonna do this. And I'm telling him about the concept of like what I've been doing thus far while he's tattooing me, and he's like, oh my God, yes, let's do it.
Oh.
So I immediately knew that his set was gonna be just around the corner at that old empty lot that's just like under construction, because there have been like these construction site trucks and things like that. And I'm like, yes, that's perfect, because it's like construction, super gay man, like, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of juxtaposition within that. A lot of this work is like dichotomy and like the opposites. So we photographed there, really just allowing them to be who they are. Again, the softness, embracing their relationship dynamic, all of that, and telling that story of like, again, the rough exterior. Oba is also not a hyper feminine male, but he is very, he is, you know what I mean? Like the feminine energy exists, but he's very masculine presenting. And so for him to have on the chaps and, you know, this very classic gay look, it was just like the perfect touch. And I trusted their vision. I didn't have to style them. He was like, just come to the shop. We have tons of looks. And I'm like, I just trust you. Just do whatever you need to do. So that was Oba and Brandon.
That was my favorite.
Yeah, their set is definitely a favorite. I mean, everybody's is so beautiful. So after Aaron, I actually went to London. And of course, I'm like, I have to photograph my two cousins who are right here, Isan and EJ. They are two queer men who are brothers, Black and also Caribbean. So it was another dynamic that was like, again, taboo. You can't be Caribbean, you can't be gay. You know what I'm saying? So, and the fact that I was in London and they're also both creative photographers, it just only made sense. You know what I mean? I came home, digested the work, and I'm like, all right, I want to do a show. I don't know where it's going to be, but I want to do something. And I hadn't quite yet done this last piece of work because he capped it. But I shared it with a couple of folks. I think it was, who's the photographer? Allen House.
Killer Visions?
Yeah.
Killer Visions?
Kevin. It was Kevin Allen. We sat down together over coffee, and I shared the work with him, and he says, something is missing. You need a hyper masculine male in this work.
The moment that she said that, I said, I got somebody. So I said, that's my cousin Bonesy. I said, you know what?
Bonesy,
Put my cousin Bonesy in there.
Wow.
Yeah, and it made sense because I had met Bonesy a couple of times, like through interactions with Seven and him coming to work and things and shows that he had. So even just me, like knowing who he is without knowing who he is, I'm like, okay, his presence is very like kind of mysterious, super masculine, but he's also a creative.
Okay.
You know what I mean? He's an artist in his own way. Like he has his own brand. He does a lot of brand development and product development. So it was like, it definitely makes sense to have him. And he was the perfect ending to this. And I actually didn't photograph that until this year.
Wow.
So everybody's work was finished in 2020.
wow.
The last piece was in London in October last year. And then I capped it with Bonesy in, I think, March. We photographed him in the springtime. Prior to photographing him, this work was already recognized and received by Josh, who is a curator here and was the curator of my show, who extended the invitation to say, hey, I really like your body of work and we think that it would fit in with our summer programming. We would like to invite you to host a show here. So it was perfect timing because I was already like, I need to have a show. I want to do a solo. I've never done one. Now I've created and generated a body of work. Yeah, this is my first solo exhibition.
Wow.
And it was already something that I wanted to do, so it was perfect timing. Of course, I said yes. At the top of the year, January, we signed the paperwork and got the ball rolling. The work still wasn't complete though, because I hadn't yet created Bonesy set, but I knew that it was the piece that was missing. So once we photographed that, I then also simultaneously said that there should be a visual element to this work. So we have the printed work, but there should be a real like visual story of why did I subconsciously choose to focus on Black men?
Right.
You know, get to the root. And that was all him. Like, you need to really identify why you decided to do this work. Like, what is it that you are still working through within your own healing work that you decided to focus on these various forms of men? And so I sat with that. And for me, when I sit with something, I'm gonna sit. Like, it takes me time, but I'm really doing this work like introspectively. Like, all of this was a part of my healing practice. And so it was then that I realized my relationship with my dad, my relationship with a romantic partner, all of those two specific relationships, which are the most significant and important to me with my lessons, were recognizing emotional voids. They came from my dad. Not understanding what love and emotions look like, or even recognizing that you're allowed to have them. And just having this rough exterior, this, you know what I mean, this inability to show emotion. And I was like, why does that exist for men? I ended a 10-year relationship. I was engaged to a man who I did not see cry, not once, in our entire partnership. Why? And I learned over time that was not healthy for me as a person, to not be able to connect with my partner in that way. And that was the sacrifice that I had to do in order to be in this space right now, to be able to create this body of work, and to honor men who do show their emotions, and to let them know that it's okay. Like, this is a safe place, this is brave.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Men don't do that. They don't know how, they're not equipped for it in a lot of ways. So the fact that you do, I had to honor them and give them their flowers.
Wow.
Yeah. We're interviewing, I'm sorry. Thank you, we're wrapping up.
So, again, from my end, getting there, I'm getting more educated about the visual arts, but as I try to articulate it, it's been really cool between you and Seven both to see your process and to kind of watch your logic as you created all this stuff, because again, when I walked in, I was just like, these are just beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, and I
don't get the full story.
I would have never put the story together.
Right.
And I also didn't, like, you've also kind of broadened my understanding of what it is to be a photographer, because I'm seeing these, you know, traditionally a photographer finds the right location, in my brain at least. And you get the right lighting and you take a picture of just the person. But you're setting up a whole set.
There's so much,
Like,
right.
It's like a set design.
It
you know
is.
what I'm
It
saying?
is set design, and that speaks to the designer in me. I have a background of interior design, so I always recreate space. That is what my work is. It's how do we connect to space as humans first? What is our interaction like? So I'm always recreating things. So that creative direction side is completely from my design background, and I've literally been able to cultivate that within photography through this work.
You did miss one more person.
Oh, thank you.
You're so welcome.
So, obviously, to cap all of this, outside of the visual, I think it was around Aaron. My grandfather was very ill, and he's a big inspiration to me because I get my photography from him. He was a photographer. He experimented with film a lot in our childhood, and he was that example of creativity for me from a very early age. What happened was, in obviously the height of COVID, he actually got it and became progressively ill. And it was the summer that I was starting to shoot Jaquan. By the time I got to Aaron and right before I left for London, he passed away. And for me, it was really difficult. It was actually in September. I went to his favorite fishing spot, and again, this work is about honoring individuals, honoring men. So for me, what better way to do that than to go to his favorite place I recreated a set with his found objects, his favorite things.
It looked like
Yeah. So I picked up a plant. I grabbed a stool. I had his fishing bag, the Bob Marley bag that's hanging. All of his fishing components were in that. So the fishing line, the rail, his camera, his cologne, his weed is left on there, like an old weed bud. His wallet, some pliers, and the Bermuda flag, because he spent a lot of time there. He is not Bermudian, my grandmother is, so that's where my family comes from. But he spent a good deal of time there because they got married and went back home, and so that's his favorite fishing place, really. But here in America, where we lived in Delaware, Battery Park was it. So I went to Battery Park, recreated a set, and honored him there. I photographed it as if his presence was there. And later went back and found images of him from back in the day and collaged them into my work. So his ghostly presence is within that work. And I collaged some florals and some of the imagery. I did a photo of him and my grandmother sitting on the stool right on here on the left side. And then I knew that I needed to implement him into this gallery. So this is a tribute wall for him.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
And this,
So, of course, because I love creating more work for myself, but I just, again, these were all steps that just felt organic, and I was just taking and letting spirit just guide me through, but I knew I wanted to have a book. So the body of work is all implemented into this coffee table book, which is more than that, because, again, it tells the full story. It shares everybody's story that was significant to them. There's a narrative written up. And then there's also more outtakes from when we were filming the visual. So there's a lot more inside of this than what you get inside of the exhibit.
oh my God.
That is Give Me My Flowers in a nutshell.
A nutshell.
Yeah, it's a lot. And
it is a lot, but it's
Y'all,
beautiful.
But
y'all
it's-
have really,
It's a really big program and that's what I wanted it to be. So early this year, because I knew all of the elements were so strong and just needed the support to be programmed, I knew that this needed to be written as a grant. So that was my first priority. I connected with grant writers to just understand, how does this logistically work? How do I write this into something that I can get funds for? I knew that it was going to cost me $5,000 or that I would need to be paid $5,000 to host this kind of work and the level of programming that I wanted to do.
Right.
So that number was always in my head. Whether I get more down the line, I'm open to that, but it didn't turn out that way because everything was so rushed and everything happened so quickly. The show I had to put up in June. I just finished the body of work in March.
Right.
So to have to turn over that quickly and to not have the proper funds to support it, I had to self-fund all of it.
Right.
So it's been a lot of groundwork, but it's literally just been setting me up for exactly what I know I need to support this. So we've programmed 3 events. We had the opening reception. I knew that the body of work needed more attention and more of an intimate viewing. So we just wrapped up last night the panel discussion, which was incredible. I invited 5 men, again, of various diverse backgrounds, to come and speak on what masculinity means to them and to really carry forth the dialogue again, but to dive deeper into that.
Sure.
And so we did that, and it was beautifully curated. I designed a merch table to have the book and tote bags. So now these are also available for purchase.
beautiful.
Yeah, and there's more to come. Like, we have such strong ideas. We wanted to do a whole garment collaboration that we're still gonna do and release. That was like an interesting spin-off, recognizing children and giving them flowers. So it's all happening. It's just, it's happening at the right times. So that is everything.
No, but
Thus
thank you
far.
for sharing this. I mean, last thing I'll say is it's really, on one hand, it's cool to just walk in and appreciate and kind of let everything sink in at a certain level, but the background stories are really important.
Yeah, it is. And to make the design of the space make sense, I knew that because upon entering, and again, this is my designer hat, accent walls should always be opposite the entrance. So I knew that this needed to be so dynamic to draw you in.
Yeah.
And because it's such a tall space with the volume, I wanted this to be a gallery wall. So I wanted the work to be intentionally placed high.
Okay.
And I wanted the color of the wall to be so vibrant and pop that it just like immediately attracted you. The crate installation was also something that I knew I needed. What I wanted originally was going to be suspended from the ceiling. And that was a whole different project. Again, timing, I had to condense things and really just do what I could do. Because I do a lot of floral play, again, that you see represented in the work, I knew that dried florals would make sense in this installation. So for me, it was about creating this like rock-like outside formation structure inside. And it made sense to do it with crates because crates are also an ode to young black boys in the hood playing basketball, reusing material, recycled and found material to do something to play.
Right.
So it just made sense to crumble them up into the structure and then embed florals through it. So that's the crate install.
Man,
It's a lot of intentionality in this, but that's my work.
I love that both of you have these messages that not only tell your story,
Yeah.
but other people's story, and
Yeah.
just there's so much meaning and beauty. You
Yeah.
know, I'm thankful.
Thank you.
We can call them friends.
Yes,
Friends.
you are friends.
Like, these my friends,
I
though.
appreciate you guys.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you guys for sticking around. We will be interviewing them at the studio, so we will catch you then.